by the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chambers for the betterment of our fellow citizens, lead us that we may do all things well. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Tabergi?
Present.
Mr. Brickway?
Here.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show 6 members are present, 1 member is absent. Members of council, what is your pleasure on the reading of the last minutes?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
make a motion to dispense with the reading of the written minutes of the last council meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld, to dispense with the reading of the last minutes. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Members of council, are there any errors or corrections to the minutes as submitted? If not, the minutes will stand as submitted. We'll move to reports of city officials. Mayor, Mr. Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, tomorrow night, Friday, August 26th, the St. Bernard Garden Club will be hosting a Sunset in the Garden party starting at 7:30 p.m. at the Community Garden on Tennis Lane. If you're unfamiliar with the area, you head north on Borman Avenue and take the first left on Tennis Lane. The Community Garden is immediately on your left before the tennis courts. Parking is available in the lot overlooking Ross Park and Frank Robinson Field at the end of the street. So bring your chair, your favorite drink, and a snack to share as you enjoy the best view of the sunset in the village. There'll be a fire to make s'mores, so come out and meet some of the gardeners and enjoy a little slice of nature in the garden. Lastly, we are working through the hiring process for the police department and have made one conditional offer that has been accepted, and additional offers will be made next week. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Auditor, Ms. Brickwick.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first part of my report is the July revenues versus the expenses, it makes it a little easier if I'm just at this point a year to say what the difference is, because there's different bills that are billed at different times, which could make it kind of not, I'm trying to think of the best word, to compare it to the previous year. But comparing the expenses, which were $7,540,397.19 over the revenues of $9,244,3.52. Year to date, we are up $1,703,606.33. On the agenda tonight is Ordinance 25. This ordinance will provide the transfer of $100,000 from general fund transfer out going into the swimming pool cash account. And it also has the additional appropriation of $20,000 to computer systems, 2K7, building management at the swimming pool, 208S for $14,420, and an additional $40,000 for fuel and oil for 2016. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director of Law, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. I have for you tonight on the agenda resolution number 4, which, as I discussed at the committee of the whole last week, is needed to, we need to establish a rule for notice of our meetings, regular meetings of the council, to comply with the revised code, and that's what this does. But in researching that, I did observe that we needed to amend our ordinance 121.10A3 for the notice provision to also come into alignment with the revised code. And so you have that before you as well tonight. I would like to have those voted on this evening. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Treasurer, Mr. Unger.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening I have the statement from Star, Ohio, with our account up there. The total at the end of July was $8,352,268.56, and that includes the $1 million deposit that the auditor mentioned earlier in the month on July the 5th. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report this evening, but I do have to my community. Let's talk about change. We can have change in our pocket, we can change a baby's diaper, then hear our voice change during puberty. Later, we may change our name and age to change of life, and then on to changing our adult undies, which, by the way, do not have pockets. It would seem to me that with all the change that life gives us, it is only logical that we may change our minds, or even better would be to look within ourselves and see if we need a change of heart. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there a report from Ms. Helms? Anyone? Nope.
Yes, Mr. President.
You have, okay.
For July 2022, tax collections were $710,855. July is down 70.54% from July of 2021. But as she explained at the last meeting, that's because the tax dates were different. Tax refunds for July are $8,626.14. Delinquent tax collected with capital recovery, $853.89. Delinquent tax collected with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, $9,829.43. And taxes paid through the e-portal for July were $203.27. As a note, a $1.1 million payment was made in June instead of the usual July, which had that payment been submitted in July, the monthly percentages would have read that we were up in June by 34.12% and down in July by 24.96%. Thank you. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Taberky.
No finance report, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to put ordinance 26, 2022 on the table tonight. That was not discussed at the committee of the whole.
I'll second that.
I thought that we did, but motion by Mr. Taberky, second by Ms. Bettinghouse to place ordinance 26 on the table. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So ordered. Safety, Mr. Brickwood.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Housefeld.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Laws, contracts, and claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
No report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Yes, Mr. President. Adult Night at the Aquatic Center is this Saturday from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. The world's worst DJ, Wild Bill, will be playing the music, and the Bengals preseason game will be on the big screen TV. Free hot dogs will be provided while they last. This is a 21 and over event that is free to season pass holders and $5 for non-pass holders. And that includes my report.
Thank you. Business and Industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
No report.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole, Ms. Stegman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minutes were submitted on Tuesday, the 22nd, and I have no communications.
Thank you. At this time, then, we will, if you could please give the first reading of Resolution Number 4, 2022.
Resolution number 4, 2022, establishing by rule notices of village council meetings, dates, times, and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of Resolution Number 4, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of resolution number 4, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to suspend with the second and third reading of Resolution Number 4, 2022. Are there any remarks?
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberky?
Valerie, sorry, I didn't get to read page 2 on the computer. In Section 4, notice of meetings, it says the person has to give request what particular type of public business to be discussed that they want notifications for. Do you have to be specific on that, or could you just say anything?
I think they can just say,
All
I want the
meetings?
committee of the whole agenda, I want the council meeting agenda, just that kind of generality.
And then why are we charging a $5 fee? They already have to pay the postage.
I can remove that if you'd like to. There's no requirement, it seemed like it was an extra housekeeping. Some of the communities have done it, some others have charged $1, some haven't done anything at all, so I'm certainly happy to quickly go out and amend this.
We could use the $5.
Mr. President?
I don't think it needs to be there
That-
myself.
Mr. Cole?
That, the $5 could include the paper, the ink, the envelopes.
That's all.
The envelopes are supplied by the people.
The ordinance, or excuse me, the resolution does say they need to provide self-addressed stamped envelopes. But yes, there are, there obviously will be additional copying charges associated with that. And I know when we're allowed to charge reasonable amounts, for example, when there's a request for, I was going to call it protection of documents, that's what we call it. But when somebody makes a public records request, we do have the right to charge them a minimal amount. I just thought $5 would kind of help cover some of the costs that may be associated with this, should people want it. It's obviously up to you.
Mr. President.
Mr.
But
DeBerke.
right now, if somebody wants a copy of minutes, they just come down and pull them off the board, correct?
I'm sorry?
If somebody would want a copy of the minutes, they could just come down and pull them off the bulletin board if they're up there. We want to charge them for them. I don't see a need to charge them $5 myself.
Like, as I said, it's up to you all. I can amend it if that's what you'd rather.
Any others?
Mr. President, I make a motion to remove.
Hold on, let me look for it. Mr. Ray Culbertson.
I don't have a problem with the $5 fee.
All right.
Make a motion to amend it to remove the $5 fee.
Is there a second? Without a second, I guess we'll leave it in. All right. Any other remarks? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. DeBerke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Sheldmeyer?
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt Resolution Number 4, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Hausfeld to adopt resolution number 4, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeBerke?
No.
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Sheldmeyer?
Aye.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Resolution number 4, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the second reading of ordinance number 15, 2022?
Ordinance number 15, 2022, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute the amendments to the VIBA Trust and VIBA Plan for the purpose of amending the plan coverage to current employees and directing an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the second reading of ordinance number 15, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion that ordinance number 15, 2022 take its regular course.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Hausfeld to have ordinance number 15, 2022 go regular course. Are there any remarks?
Yes, Mr. President.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Just to let everybody know, there was some questions regarding if I was allowed to vote on this or not. And because this does not hinder anything doing with my family or my dad in the past or my mom now, I will be voting on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other remarks? Not, clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Mr. DeBerke?
Aye.
Mr. Rickwig?
Abstention.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Abstain.
And Mr. Sheldmeyer?
Aye.
4 ayes, 2 abstentions. Motion carries. Ordinance 15, 2022 will take its regular course. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 24, 2022?
Ordinance number 24, 2022, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various components codes of the codified ordinances of St. Bernard, Ohio, revising the traffic general offenses and fire prevention codes to comply with state law and directing an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 24, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Wait. What number? I'm sorry. 24?
24.
Okay, I got the wrong one. Okay, I got it. Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 24, 2022.
Second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. Ray Culberson, to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 24, 2022. Are there any remarks? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Turkey?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 24, 2022.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. Ray Culbertson, to adopt ordinance number 24, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey? Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 24, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 25, 2022?
Ordinance number 25, 2022, authorizing and directing the auditor to transfer funds and provide additional appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 25, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 25, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld, to suspend the second and third reading of ordinance number 25, 2022. Are there any remarks? If not, I apologize. I just realized that I did not ask the audience if they had any comments. Do anyone wish to address council on ordinance 25? Clerk, will you call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt ordinance number 25, 2022.
Second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson, to adopt ordinance number 25, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 25, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 26, 2022?
Ordinance number 26, 2022, an ordinance amending section 121.10A3 of the codified ordinances of the Village of St. Bernard, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 26, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 26, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld, to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 26, 2022. Are there any remarks? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 26? If not, clerk, will you call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 26, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld, to adopt ordinance number 26, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 26, 2022 is adopted as read. At this time, does anyone on council have anything under old business?
Mr. President.
Mr. Taberkey?
Jonathan, what, any update on the medical marijuana?
Not at this point. We have a map that's basically drawn out that shows the available areas that could potentially exist, and we'll be working through Jerry Stoker basically to start the zoning portion of it before then it comes to council. But basically, I need to find out if indeed we basically open it up where we show the entire area that are possibilities, or whether or not there's input as to what is going to be advertised as proposed areas, but there'll be a community engagement portion of it where I guess ultimately people could potentially object. The Ross Avenue corridor is really the only area that would affect any residents. So that would be, because again, that's not the area that I was suggesting before where our adult entertainment district is down of Vine and Murray. But the Ross Avenue corridor portion would be the area where people would have, again, affect residents. So I'm going to be leaning on Jerry Stoker to kind of run the rest of the process, basically, with setting up the community engagement side and then the proposed text change to, our zoning. But it starts with him, then it would come to council. So I will have a report, hopefully with some type of date starting to be scheduled with when we can start that process to determine how that will flow. But again, we did measure out basically the areas that would, again, be eliminated just based on the state code. So we're that far.
Thank you. Then also, a couple years ago, we were looking into the rehab loan fund. Was anything ever found out about that?
At this point, no, it didn't really go any farther. To be honest with you, the money is still there. But the individuals that were guiding the process, that basically were going to administer the entire thing, were not comfortable with continuing. It was going to be managed by First State Bank, and the individuals that kind of drew up the original plan are not even there and not really in line or were comfortable with what was originally proposed. So, I mean, we had Mr. Unger was kind enough to give me the big folder, but that to go through the process, but it's almost like it didn't happen ever, so they weren't comfortable with the process. So we would have to try to determine how it could proceed and someone to manage it, but the proposed plan was not going to work.
Anyone else under old business? Does anyone on council have anything under new business?
Mr. President,
Mayor Stewart.
actually in our attendance this evening, we have Chris Sauer, the special events coordinator for the Recreation Department and the chairman by default of the German Luau Committee.
Hello. Yes, I'm Chris Sauer, and I wanted to give an update on the German Luau. So I'm going to go through some things, and then I'm available for questions and do the best I can. We are nearly done. We're nearly ready to close the books on this. There are a few things we just need to get allocated appropriately, but I'm able to give some pretty good numbers for the top line. Our revenue with sponsorship was $44,535.45. Weekend revenue, so what we took in at the event, was $31,335. Weekend expenses, $22,783. And excitingly, we are going to actually be able to increase our profit share to the nonprofits and community groups up to about $15,000 this year, which is in line given the fact that we basically doubled the number of booths we had. We had 18 booths operated by those nonprofits and community organizations, 9 individual groups, many more if you consider all the individual teams from St. Bernard that participated. So that was an excellent thing, and we're going to be able to do a lot of good. Those groups will be able to do a lot of good, and so they provided in those 18 booths well over 500 hours worth of effort. So this is not a freebie. This was not a handout. They did all the work necessary to put a festival on. So I think it's good. Our revenue was in line with 2019 and 2021, which is actually pretty impressive given that we went from a 3-day event down to 2. And also the pulled pork was one of our main food booths and was operated by the committee last year, but was handled by one of those nonprofits this year. So taking that revenue out just indicates just how successful the event was. We don't have great numbers. We don't have a clicker when people walk in, but anecdotally the crowds were good. Our sales were, again, high. We had 4,800 alcohol tickets sold, so that's a barometer, I suppose, of how things went. This year, in years past, we'd done the inflatables to work for the kids, which had some mixed results. This year, we operated a much more traditional kind of kids game area, which was very successful. We had 10 of those booths, and it was pretty popular, very popular, in fact, much more so than we predicted or budgeted. So we're going to most likely take that and actually build upon it next year. That's the hope. So in pretty much all of the key metrics, we did better. It was a little easier on all of us by only having 2 days. And so that was good. We had more booths than we've ever had before. In fact, we ran out of booths from the village. We used them all. We had more groups from the community here. As I mentioned, we were able to support them financially more than we've ever done before. We feel like attendance was pretty much up there, as close to 2019 as possible, which was obviously our first year back, and so that was a big thing. We had excellent media coverage, both television, newspaper, online, etc. We had television crews here, and we had good coverage for both days. Our sponsorship was the highest we've had, both in dollar amounts as well as number of sponsors. And like I said, the financial results were good. So this is a good report. We hope to build on it in the years to come, or in the next year to come. We expect to actually start planning for that at the tail end of this year. So, you know, to kind of get a jump on it. We don't know what 2023 will bring, given that we've got some construction things that are hopefully going to wrap up, and we've got options on things we can do. So we want to get a jump on it. And we invite anyone in the community who wants to be a part of that. We'll start meeting again in the fall. Once those dates are set, I'll make certain that those get announced, and so that everyone is welcome to join.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mayor Steve.
So first off, I'd like to thank Chris. He's an excellent organizer, puts the best effort into all of this, and does a fabulous job. So we really couldn't do this without him. I'd also definitely like to thank the rest of the committee for all their hard work and hours. Appreciate all their participation. Those that participated in the celebrity dunk booth, the Culberson brothers that were in, myself, and of course we have another celebrity guest, of course, Mr. Durbin here in the audience with us tonight, who actually ended the evening for us on Saturday. But the dunk booth was a lot of fun, brought in a lot of interest. Just the lower area on Vine that had all the kids' activities, I don't think anyone really missed having the rides. Everyone kept busy. Everyone was having a great time. There were plenty of prizes, and again, no parent had to forfeit $40 for a ride bracelet. So everyone seemed to be having a great time. It was a good weekend. So I don't think we could have asked for anything better. We're looking for additional participation next year for individuals that would like to step up. We're open to new members and new ideas. So again, I can't thank everyone enough for how this all worked out.
Thank you. Any more, Chris?
Nope.
Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, anyone else on council under new business? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Please state your name and address.
Matthew Durbin, 36 Baker. First, I'd like to start saying that I think the dunking booth did amazing. The kids really enjoyed that, especially when I was in there. And one of the officers really enjoyed dunking me. Okay. I heard that. Only once. One of the other things I want to bring up is the Resolution 4. I do think the $5 is a little bit ridiculous of a high price for a piece of paper with some ink on it for public information, when I can go and get some other copies made at a library for 10 cents. It's also paper and ink that was already provided by residents with tax money. So I think that is a bit high and ridiculous, but I don't know what other municipalities charge for that. There was other thing I was going to bring up, but I don't feel like bringing it up. I'm too tired. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address council? If not, what is council's pleasure on the absent member?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to excuse the absent member.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. Schultmeyer to excuse the absent member. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered. The next committee of the whole will be Thursday, September 8th at 7 p.m. This time I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culberson.
make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Mr. Ray Culberson, second by Ms. Housefeld to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered. We are adjourned.